This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
I'd like to convene the Board of Fire Commission meeting for April 15, 2025. I'd like everyone to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. I'd like to ask, first of all, I want to say welcome, new Deputy Chief Jeff Naples, to our first commission meeting and your first day on the job. So welcome aboard.
Right in it.
Thank you again. I appreciate this opportunity and looking forward to each day here in North Haven.
Well, we're looking forward to you contributing as well, so welcome aboard.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask for the approval of the minutes of the Board of Fire Commission meeting from March 13, 2025. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Is there any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And also the regular meeting that took place on March 18, 2025. Do I hear a motion to accept those minutes?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. The chief's report.
Good evening, all. We'll start with alarms as we normally do. So as of this time in 2024, we're at 1,361 alarms. As we sit here today, we're at 1,330. So consistent with last year overall. Our last meeting, I have it as March 18th. So the set of numbers I'm going to give you is going to cover from a March 18th to yesterday, April 14th. So during that period of time, we had 14 ALS intercepts or transports, 12 incident responses to the highway, 97 incidents in which just an ambulance was responded without the need for fire apparatus. And then here we go, there's 69 occurrences, accounting for 151 incidents in which there are overlapping calls. In total, there were 346 incidents in this time period, which accounts for a 44% overlap of incidents. So that's where we are with alarms at this time. Regarding the budget, we're at 78.8%. The intent right now is to try to stay as much under budget as possible. I know that's always the intent, a little more diligent this year. Been informed that from the finance director to try to deliver as much of a surplus as we can, considering the overall town finances. And so we are going to do our best to hold off on discretionary spending. But just I ask two things. There's really only a couple discretionary lines that I have available to me. One is the building line, one is equipment line, and that's about it. I mean, other than some smaller insignificant lines like fire prevention or something, right? So I'm going to do my best to hold off on some spending in those lines, but so much of the fire department budget is contractually driven. There's not a lot that I can do. Even the overtime line, in some ways, while it's discretionary, I'm also not going to compromise staffing because of budget concerns. And so the ask is that as we start to look at closing out this fiscal year, which I realize it's April, it's not that far away, I would ask that as we start to look at budget lines that might have money remaining in them, that is not perceived as not needing the funding for next fiscal year, that is simply trying to deliver as much of a surplus within the fire department budget as possible for the betterment of the town and the overall town finances. But what I worry is that members of the Board of Finance will look to capture savings next year, and that would be inappropriate to do that. We are holding off on purchasing right now some discretionary items until the next fiscal year. So hopefully we can establish that moving forward.
What is the thinking on having a big surplus for this year going to do to help us with our budget for next year? Are we applying the surplus
No,
from this year to next year's budget? Because
Not so much
doesn't make a
next
whole
year's
lot of
budget,
sense.
this current year's budget. The revenue is down overall in town on the building fees and the fire fees.
So they're hoping that the surplus in different departments will offset
The offset
the
of revenue
the
this
revenue.
fiscal year.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. So that message was received, and we're doing the best we can to accommodate that, but again, we're a little limited in what we can do here. I don't have updated revenue fees on the fire fees. Through period 8, it was at just over $290,000. And on the ALS building, we're just over $71,000. So I don't have updated financials on those. But to give you some perspective, we were just over 290, and the revenue was anticipated to be 500. And that's a direct. If building said it was going to be X number of dollars, and the fire fees are based on the building fees. Regarding some staffing that's impacting the budget, we continue to have 2 members at the Connecticut Fire Academy, and their anticipated graduation date is in June of this year. Once they graduate, we can have them get started on shifts. 1 member continues to be on sick leave since September 8th, 2024. No word on a return date. 1 member has been on injury leave since November 6th. We expect their return to be June of 2025. And we had 1 member who just returned from injury leave. They were out from December through just a couple of weeks ago. So those are some of the staffing numbers that are impacting the budget. Moving on from there, the fire marshal's report, you were provided with a packet prior to this meeting. 59 total inspections for the month of March. 10 code violations were discovered through the inspections. 8 were corrected. We had 2 abatement orders that were issued. 35 plan reviews. Remember, sometimes these can be as simple as a tenant fit out. So in an existing, let's say, storefront has a tenant inside, and a tenant moved, and when it comes in, that's still a plan review associated with that. So please don't confuse why our revenue is down on the plan review fees. If we're seeing 35 just in a given month, there's probably not a lot of money associated with it. It's just a new tenant moving into a commercial space. 20 permits were approved, 54 public record requests, and 38 different phone calls to the fire marshal's office with various questions. And we called out our fire investigators on 2 different occasions during the month of March. You can see 17 fires in the month of March. 2 of those which we called out the investigators to do a fire investigation report. Anything for questions at this point from the commission?
Quick question about ALS billing. ALS billing happens when we transport people to the hospital?
Transport or assist with the transport.
Okay, but not necessarily about any treatment that is happening? No, okay. It's
Nope.
just the transport?
The only time it's specific to treatment is if our paramedic has to assist with the hospital and assist on the way into the hospital. There's an ALS billing fee that's part of that that Nelson doesn't charge, but we do charge. Nelson doesn't charge it because they don't have a paramedic. Otherwise, they'd be charging the same thing. So
Okay.
we don't charge for medical responses. No.
Okay.
How far of the delay is that incurred but not reported? So if we transported someone and the paramedic was in with Nelson and let's say it was today, how long will it take before we actually see that?
It depends on the insurance company. There's so many variables. There's so many different insurance companies out there. It really depends. The average is probably 60 to 90 days, but there's some insurance companies that take a lot longer.
So that this 71,000 that we're talking about certainly is money in, but we've had incurred but not reported or not received as of yet. Do we know what that amount is?
We don't, because if you look at the next time you get a bill in the mail, an insurance statement in the mail, there's the fee for service, right? And then there's the insurance rate. So we don't know what that insurance rate is going to be for all these different providers that are out there. It changes.
And Nelson, in terms of having a paramedic, how often do they have a paramedic
So contractually, they have to have a paramedic on duty, one paramedic on duty at all times.
But there are two,
There's at least 2 ambulances.
Two
At least.
ambulances,
There's
but-
typically more than that.
okay. But they only have to have one paramedic in town. Okay.
The town of North Haven maintains what we call the R5, the paramedic license to provide paramedic service.
Okay.
So what percentage of individuals don't have insurance?
So we don't have, I have to run the numbers and get what's called a payer mix to determine that. And we haven't ran those numbers in quite some time.
And my understanding is we don't go after anyone, as far as residents are concerned, if we provided services looking to get reimbursed for those services.
There's a
Is
few
that
different
correct?
variables that go into there, yeah. But the last time I checked, we were under 10% of Medicaid. So if there's no other questions moving forward, I'm not going to ask the Deputy Chief of Administration for a report because it's his first day, and that would just be mean. But
Since when? I mean, all of a sudden you're changing.
right? But I have asked the Deputy Chief of Operations to present a brief report from his perspective.
Good evening, Commissioners. I did also hand out just a one-pager, two-sided for you as far as monthly training report for the month of March. So during the month of March, we completed 285 hours of training. That could be combined training with multiple people in the classroom or single individuals taking independent study classes or online training. For the career firefighters, that represents 816 individual training hours that were spent. And for the volunteer firefighters, 206 individual training hours. So you could have 10 people attending a 1-hour drill, and that would add up there. I did break down on here the general categories of the training that's completed, because it's the first time going through it. Administrative can be anything from SOPs, policy changes, procedures, community risk reduction, out in the field, out in the community. Those numbers will start going up as we start doing hydrant inspections. Driver education, we have task books for each of our different types of apparatus. So when we have new drivers getting ready to learn how to drive, there's a lot of road time that goes on, inspections of the equipment in the station, getting it ready for everything. Officer education as required to do by OSHA. We do a certain amount of training for just the officers. They're supposed to be trained at a higher level than the firefighters. That includes both volunteers and career members. Operations training makes up the bulk of it, along with the OSHA training. That's our firefighter hands-on training, practical skills, throwing ladders, pulling hoses, taking hydrants. The OSHA, we're heavy in the colder months, bloodborne pathogen training, hazardous materials refresher training, all those things that we're required to do. We do separate out some of the volunteer drills. Volunteers train Wednesday evenings between 2 and 3 hours, so that adds up there. And also the Explorer training, which I'll address a little bit later, when we have members of the volunteer companies assisting with teaching the Explorers from post-1912. And then finally, I broke out the individual and online training hours. So we pay for a learning management system for medical training for people. So any downtime in the station, in between calls and organized drills, they can go online and do things to maintain their medical refresher skills, both ALS and BLS skills. So they're called CMEs, Continuing Medical Education. We do that. We also roll out a lot of our required training through the online platforms. So February is Bloodborne Pathogen Month when we do all the refresh training. 3 people were out of work sick. I have to make up training on there, and we can follow up if I do that. Some of the highlights, just breaking down, most of the training we focus between career and volunteers. We try to keep it relatively similar, but there are some differences. The volunteers in town don't have medical responder status, so we don't have to do a lot of the EMS training. We return that back onto firefighter operations training. There's a number of new probationary members, trying to get them time on the hoses, learning how to take hydrants, things like that. A couple other things that came out, UTV. Those are our all-terrain vehicles that we use during brush fires. Last year, there was a firefighter fatality during the Berlin brush fire where a UTV rolled over and unfortunately killed a firefighter up there. Major changes came out from the state of Connecticut and OSHA with model guidance on how to prepare people to use those, including the addition of actual helmets that we wear on there. We had to acquire the helmets, train the people, and then manufacture training for each of them. So we've played some catch up on that, like every fire department in the state of Connecticut is doing, and we've rolled out a pretty comprehensive program for everybody there. The only other things I just want to mention, it is National Telecommunicator Week for 2025. We've, along with many other departments, have recognized our dispatchers over there for the job they do on there, so it's worthy of note here. Our Explorer posts, so we have 4 current Explorers in post 1912. Over the last year, they've completed about 56 hours, between 56 and 66 hours of training. Those are from volunteers on Tuesday nights that would come in and help teach them firefighting and the tools of the trade, the PPE and stuff like that. They finally got to a point through all their training and a curriculum that was designed by one of our prior Explorers, who's a current volunteer. We've done a written exam for them and a practical exam, and they are ready to be promoted, if you will, to be able to observe and train with the volunteer firefighters on Wednesday night drills. So the chief and I have been in close contact on this. That's part of the policy as far as allowing them to promote that way. We're very proud of them. They're all 4 are North Haven High School students. They've really committed to it. They're enthusiastic, and one of them came to their first drill the other night and they really enjoyed it. So it's a good thing. Our hope is that they'll eventually become volunteer firefighters. If not, they at least have a good idea of what the fire service involves, what the training is, and they've had some experience to meet some new people and learn some leadership skills. Any questions on anything?
Of the 4, how many are females?
No females in that group.
Thank you.
And we're open to recruitment of additional people. We did recruit a female advisor as the scouts required to allow for that. We're ready for it. We just haven't had anybody who's wanted to do it yet with their sport schedules.
Deb, thank you for this detailed report. We really appreciate it. It's the first time we've seen this. It just shows the kind of activity and education and drilling that our volunteers and staff are going through and what you lead them in. So thank you for that. And for our dispatchers, thank you. It's been all over Facebook, both from the PD and the fire department standpoint, thanking and congratulating our 911 dispatchers. They're the first line of communication for persons who are in need. And we thank them for their service and for their clear communication to both the fire department and the police department in order to do the jobs that we do. I should say our staffs do. So thank you on behalf of this commission to our dispatchers. Any other questions regarding this report from the deputy chief? There are none, we'll move on.
Yep, I have nothing further for Chief's report. Nope.
Any other questions of the chief regarding his report? Any correspondence, chief?
So Chairman, I'll keep this easy. I have no correspondence other than the day-to-day. I personally have no old business or new business. I have a couple items for good of the department.
Okay. Any commissioners receive any correspondence?
No.
Any commissioners have any contribution toward old business or new business of the department?
I have a couple of quick things for new business related to the current budget conversations and that kind of thing. The first thing I wanted to get clarification, because I know the chairman of the Board of Finance got up and spoke at the public hearing saying that when we talk about NFU, that doesn't mean that nobody's responding, it means that Nelson is responding. So I just want to get clarification on that process, because I didn't think that was accurate, because not all the calls would Nelson go to and be able to handle, right?
Correct. So just like there are incidents that we do not respond to, that Nelson does, the same is just the opposite. So there's incidents that we don't need an ambulance to respond to. For example, a car fire, a brush fire, there's no ambulance going to those incidents. So an NFU is, again, it's automatically generated. It's assigned by the CAD anytime that a resource is designed to be assigned to that incident type and that resource isn't available. So that could be a blocking engine, it could be no apparatus available at all, it could be any number of variety of items. So that's when that NFU is being generated. So, remember that we didn't really start using that NFU until about September of 2024. It wasn't in place the entire calendar year. So it's not an accurate statement to say that it was only 60-something times last year. It was only 60-something times in basically a quarter of the year. Prior to that, we would rely exclusively on arrival times of apparatus, and that's what we had reported for years prior, was arrival times, right? We got away from that because we found that the arrival times, the numbers were kind of skewed, because what's the arrival time if it never arrived? So that's when the NFU was implemented and built into the CAD, and there are times that an NFU is generated that we don't have a unit immediately available, but one clears up when it clears another scene, and then if it's an appropriate unit to send to that incident, it'll go. NFU can also be if a second like resource, let's say an engine, right? So we're not sending just one apparatus to the highway, so if there's only one apparatus available to go to the highway, and the CAD is saying, hey, but I need 2 or 3 depending on what it is, then it's going to be the unit that's available and then 2 NFU units, right? And NFU can also be generated when there's quite simply nothing left, nothing to respond. And that NFU can stay indefinitely, and sometimes it'll be a medical, and Nelson Ambulance will respond, and we have communication with Nelson Ambulance to make sure that they arrived on scene. Sometimes nobody will go at all. So it depends. There's just too many answers, and you know, to try to chase that down for you every single month, I'd have to chase down the story for every incident. What I will tell you is Nelson Ambulance has a requirement to provide at least 2 ambulances in town at any given time, but chances are that if we're busy, they're busy. And so now we still have ambulances respond other than Nelson to this town for incidents. It could be AMR, it could be Wallingford, it could be North Branford. Nelson still runs out of ambulances. During the daytime, they're a lot deeper in staff because they're taking care of a lot of non-emergent transfers in the area, dialysis trips and discharges from the hospitals and things like that. So Nelson will reach to those ambulances to be able to fill in the 911 calls when we're traditionally at our highest. You know, the daytimes are usually the busiest of the times. But understand that in nights, evenings, weekends, Nelson doesn't have a whole lot of other transfers and so forth going on. Dialysis is closed, doctor's offices are closed, so there's no ambulances to be able to call upon. We're pretty much left with what we have here in town.
And then the other question that came up was around the volunteer firehouses being offline. I had someone who was asking me about if a volunteer is available, why would the volunteer house be offline, and the reason that sort of decision was made. So I thought maybe if we could have a little bit of a conversation of how that is working, and how that decision is made that it'll go offline.
So it's entirely driven by each volunteer station's captain or leadership. In the absence of captain, there's a chain of command there. At least 2 qualified interior rated firefighters, volunteer firefighters, need to be available for an apparatus to be in service. We don't send apparatus out with one person. That is not something that we want to even begin to discuss. It's not safe practice at all. So 2 firefighters need to be available for an apparatus to be in service. And what we found was, after looking at the data, looking at several years worth of data, the volunteers are being dispatched and they were not responding. And we would, some of these are critical incidents, and so we'd be texting the officers saying, do you have a crew? Do you have anybody that can go to this scene? Go to this station, the station, pick up an engine. And we found more and more the answer was no, we have nobody available. Well, then we stopped dispatching them. Mm-hmm. So now we shifted responsibility to the volunteer leadership to be able to self-manage. The volunteer captains are paid a small stipend monthly, and so this goes towards that. And they need to self-manage if they have text group threads and so forth, and some apps that they can use. But they need to determine if there's at least 2 volunteers available. And if there's not, then the apparatus is out of service. What they had asked for back when we discussed this in September, October, was they said without very little question, from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. every day, they had no volunteers available. So it started from 7 to 3. About 2 months ago, that extended for 7 to 5 for one of the 2 volunteer stations. And there's some deviations from that. There's some times on Friday nights or on Saturdays or on Sundays that there's nobody available. And so they go out of service.
And the point of that is to make sure that we're not acting as if something, an apparatus is going to respond when they're not available to
No
respond.
different than the CAD is automatically assigning those NFU units as needed. The CAD, if those engines are in service, those volunteer apparatus in service, the CAD will look to assign those apparatus. And so we have to pull them out of service so that they're not dispatched. Otherwise, you're dispatching a resource you know isn't going to respond.
Right. Okay.
Jen, you bring up a very valid point. I think the misconception of some is that this leadership of our department and our commission have somehow or another discouraged volunteers and volunteerism in this town, which is further from the truth. As the chief clearly indicated, the captains came before us September, October of last year, and indicated as a result of conversation with their volunteers, they are not able to show up. And in order for us to plan and provide coverage, we needed to make appropriate accommodations. And I think the chief clearly indicated that we've taken apparatus out of service unless 2 volunteers show up, and one of which is qualified to drive the apparatus. So we're talking about $750,000 or more expensive apparatus that someone is going to be driving, so they need to be qualified to do so, as the training indicated on your report, Deputy. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions from people, and I was trying to explain it, but I wanted to be clear what the process was and why the decisions were made and that kind of thing.
And it's kind of interesting because, again, a number of people have really believed that we've discouraged the volunteers and we were the cause of their reduction of ranks, when in fact we've talked about this as a national issue. It's not a North Haven Fire Department issue. It's truly a national issue as far as volunteering in all aspects of nonprofits, but in particular for volunteer fire departments. And we've experienced this throughout the years. We started off many years ago with 105 volunteers, and now we're down to 15, 20. And of those 15 or 20, unfortunately, for a variety of different reasons, they could only show up a certain percentile of times. And if the numbers serve me correctly, it's about 30% of the time. It could be a little bit more, I'm not quite sure. But how do you plan in any business when you don't have folks that are going to show up, when they are the supplementary staff that supplements your full-time fire department? So for those out in the public that are under that belief, please understand that it's totally incorrect. It's strictly because these volunteers are busy working 2 jobs, they have families, they're not able to dedicate the time for education. The chief, deputy chief indicated 285 drill hours in the past month. Many folks don't have the time to do so. Many folks don't have the time for the education as far as Fire 1 is concerned, which is the minimum requirement for a full-time a volunteer firefighter. So that's the reasoning behind, part of the reasoning behind folks not volunteering. And our request as a commission and our support for the request when the chief presented at the workshop for 4 additional firefighters was as a result of not having the staff that were necessary to do the things that our commission has been learning about month to month, looking at the documentation that's presented by the leadership of this department, and we being in support of what that request was. And as we said during our informational meetings, and Chief, thank you very much, for your presentation at those two meetings. Your information was very helpful. I think we received many compliments,
Yes.
and people were amazed as to looking at those videos and watching both of those rooms catch on fire, and your explanation as to, you know, what they need to do and how toxic those fires are. But, you know, the important thing is that, you know, folks believe that we don't need additional firefighters in our town. And our advocacy here as elected fire commissioners is to represent the department based on the needs and based on what we've learned over the previous 12 months and the previous years of being in need of full-time firefighters. So there might be some folks out there that are saying, well, no one has asked for more paid staff. I haven't heard anything from anyone that's saying we need more paid staff. But in the meantime, here we are, elected fire commissioners that have a fiduciary responsibility to present to the public what information we learn on a monthly basis, and that information is articulated through the chief during the workshop and presented to the Board of Finance, and ultimately will go to the residents of this town. So and as we've said during our meetings, it's entirely up to the residents of the town as to what direction they want to go in as far as the budget is concerned. I'm hopeful that the budget passes, so there's no reductions, both on the town side and the Board of Education side. However, as we move forward, the need for additional full-time firefighters still exists. So we need to keep that in mind as residents of this town.
I'm a little bit in a different thinking about the budget, because I will not support it if it does not include the firefighters. I just think it's a mistake. We're putting our money in the wrong place. And there are plenty of solutions to where the money can come from. So I publicly said it at the meeting. I will not support it unless the firefighters are there. We're spending money on all kinds of things that we don't have to spend money on. And it's makes no sense to me why we wouldn't put public safety first, so.
Well, I don't disagree, but again, it's going to be entirely up to the residents that come to the next town meeting, and as to what their pleasure is. We did hear at the last town meeting support of the fire department. I think there's, you know, three different directions that folks are looking to go in. You know, reduce the budget. I can't afford more tax money. Add more firefighters. So there's, I think, three different positions that folks are taking. But I certainly don't want to see any services reduced. But you know, I think that's something that's going to be entirely up to the residents of the town. But you know, just a clarity as far as, you know, our support for volunteers. We ask for more volunteers on a monthly basis. Every one of our communications through the fire department is asking for persons to volunteer. So we encourage the persons to volunteer, and the stipends that have most recently been added to try and encourage people to volunteer and to help underwrite some of their costs is a direct result of communications from the volunteers to the leadership of this department and the commission, and to Mike Frieda, our first selectman, and that has most recently been implemented. So we are totally and completely supportive of volunteers, and we thank them for their years of service to our town.
Chief, are we advertising the stipends?
So in the recruitment literature that the volunteers have, they discuss the fact that there's a stipend and a pension that's still available to them, yeah.
And can you just reattack what this stipend is, just for?
Yeah, it's tiered based on level of activity. So it's driven by drills and call attendance, and I believe it caps out right now. The state keeps passing some laws that bump it up a little bit more, and so we have to periodically dig back into the ordinance and update it some more. But I want to say the most they can get is $2,500, and so that's all based on how many calls, how many drills. Most of them don't qualify that because that's an awful lot of calls they have to attend, but the majority of them do. And so the ordinance that passed recently takes care of those young volunteers that don't yet have any kind of taxes because they might still live with mom and dad. And so that will help them in terms of getting something that's equal to what they would have otherwise qualified for with an abatement. And that same ordinance took care of those who live outside of town, because we do have a number of people who live outside of North Haven because and volunteer here because the town they live in doesn't have an active volunteer rank anymore. So it's a matter of those two items, yeah. The other thing to just keep in mind is there's a meeting tomorrow night with the Board of Finance, in which I expect the town budget to be prepared for the town meeting. And I would just reflect on a number of emails that I sent to this commission. I feel like I'm sending you at least an email once a month with another volunteer organization in the state that's been closed down. So this problem is not unique to North Haven.
Absolutely.
And Mr. Chairman, I can't thank you enough for the advocacy that you just said, and it was well spoken and well said, your prior statements. I just wanted to make sure that you understand that we're behind you as well.
Appreciate that, thank you. Any other, we went through old business, any other new business of the department? The good of the department. Chief?
I believe you have a couple of motions.
We do have a couple of
can
motions.
Get through those perhaps.
Okay.
These are typical routine, formalities that we need to do.
I make a motion to accept Chaz DeLeon and Elizabeth Yvonne, can you help me with her last name? Burns. As a probationary members of the West Ridge Company 3 effective immediately.
Do I hear a second to the motion?
Second.
Is there any question on the motion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
I make a motion to accept Dominic DiMarcadio and Stephen Hansen as probationary members of the Northeast Company 4 effective immediately.
Do I hear a second to the motion?
Second.
Any question on the motion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
Sharon, as you just mentioned, we're certainly not deterring people from volunteering. If we have 4 new probationary members that we're encouraging to join the ranks, we'll support them throughout their endeavors of training and seeking out the necessary credentials. We're fortunate that we've had a couple of people express an interest in volunteering that have moved here from elsewhere in the country. I believe at least 2 of those individuals have been listed tonight, and they already have some baseline training. And so we have to go through a process here where we get to vet them to make sure that before we put them into an IDLH environment, right, immediately dangerous to life and health environment, that even though they have the credential that says that they passed a class, that we actually see it for ourselves before we inherently put them in danger. So we're fortunate that we've got some renewed interest in volunteers, and we'll work to provide whatever support we can for them. The only a couple things I have, and you covered it when we started, was I wanted to welcome Deputy Chief Naples. That's listed under good of the department. I also want to reference that we're continuing with some repairs at the Northeast Station. Those repairs are ongoing. We are continuing to look at a memorial mass for our fallen firefighters here in North Haven. More to come on that. That may actually get pushed off until the fall. I'm still working on some details for that. And the last item I had for good of the department, which we can talk more in executive session because it's in draft form, I do want to acknowledge I provided the NIOSH report to the commission for your review, and we can certainly discuss that more shortly here. And that's what I had for good of the department.
Any other commissioners have anything for the good of the department? Hearing none, we'll move on. There's no one here for public comments. I'll entertain a motion to move into executive session.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. I'd like to reconvene the North Haven Fire Commission meeting for April 15th. Any further business coming before this commission? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.